Welcome to the West End Video Newsletter. My name is Joe LaPiccolo, your host for this week's newsletter. Today's topic is going to be the Vilna Shul, one of the last old-time remaining synagogues in the Boston area. And our guest today is David Glater, president of the Vilna Center for Jewish Heritage. Welcome, David.
Thank you.
How are you today? Good. Good. Fine to have you here. This is going to be a very interesting show. It's can you tell us what is the Vilna Shul?
The Vilna Shul. Shul is a Yiddish word. It means synagogue. The Vilna Shul is the last of the old shuls built by the immigrant community, the Jewish community that settled in Boston's West End and North End and the North Slope of Beacon Hill in the late 1800s and early 1900s, early part of the century. After urban renewal, the Vilna Shul, because it's fortuitously located on Beacon Hill, on the north slope of Beacon Hill, the Vilna Shul is the last of the old shuls, and it's still intact.
And what street is it on?
It's on Phillips Street.
And it's surrounded by tenements? And
it's surrounded by apartment buildings, that's right.
Okay. And can you give us a brief history of the shul, when it began and so forth?
Sure. The Vilna congregation was made up of people who came, at least as we understand it, from Vilna, Lithuania. Vilna, Lithuania was considered a center of Jewish learning in Eastern Europe. It was referred to, in fact, as the Jerusalem of Eastern Europe. The people left, Jewish people emigrated from Vilna and Lithuania, came to Boston in the late 1800s, settled in the West End. The Vilna congregation was formed, we understand, in the late 1800s, 1898. It moved from various sites. It had various sites for synagogues in the West End and on Beacon Hill until finally it acquired the site on Phillips Street. Some tenement buildings were torn down and the shul was built and opened in 1919.
So was it located in the West End, the lower end of the slope, the old West End, or at one time?
I don't know about the previous locations.
Okay.
We haven't been able yet we're a new organization. We haven't done the historical research to find out about its roots prior to moving into the building that it occupied in 1919.
And what is so important about the restoration of the synagogue?
There's no marker in Boston that memorializes and commemorates this wave of Jewish immigration into Boston, the first major wave of Jewish immigration into Boston. The Vilna Shul it's intact. The interior of it, the sanctuary of it, has not been destroyed or messed up, except a little bit by water damage in the building. It's a perfect opportunity to save this shul as a marker of that immigration into the city, came, settled, formed a congregation, gained confidence, and eventually moved on, as is the story with many ethnic groups that moved into and through downtown Boston.
Another site on the hill is the Black History Black Museum.
The African Meeting House.
And that was a temple at one time?
That was a synagogue at one point in its history, that's right. In fact, there are photographs with a sign on its side with Hebrew characters stating that it was a synagogue.
So you have two really historic buildings up on the hill.
That's right.
That is already preserved, and you're going to preserve.
That's right. We want to buy and restore and preserve the Vilna Shul, not only as a historic site, but as a Jewish cultural center. Our goal is to restore the sanctuary of the shul, and that will be available to Jewish groups in the community for special worship services. We can envisage an Israeli Independence Sabbath service, peace services, perhaps high holiday services, things of that sort. And we want to use the Vilna Shul as a focal point for programming that traces the history of Boston's Jewish community and its traditions, and also provides a forum for current and contemporary Jewish concerns.
And at the present time, there is nothing in Boston life.
There's nothing in downtown Boston that accomplishes these objectives. That's right. The congregation itself has dwindled to one member who petitioned the state Supreme Court to dissolve the congregation in the late 80s. That's happened. The building is now in the hands of a court-appointed receiver.
Mm-hmm. And when was your organization formed?
Our organization, the Vilna Center for Jewish Heritage, is a very new organization. We were formed in December of 1990 with the purpose of buying and restoring the Vilna Shul and conducting a Jewish cultural center in it.
Is there a large group? How many people in your group?
We're a small group now, but we're growing.
Mm-hmm.
As word gets out through programs like this and our newspaper articles, we get more and more interest. People who either have ties to the Shul or ties to the West End, or who see the need for a Jewish cultural center that traces the roots of the Jewish community in Boston.
Mm-hmm. And at one time, I hear it was a vibrant synagogue. There were how many members? Did you have any lists of?
We don't know exactly how many members. There is a marble plaque on the back wall of the sanctuary that lists probably well over 100 names of congregation members. We believe that plaque was put up at the time that the synagogue was built, probably in the 1920s. There are similar marble plaques in the back wall of the women's section of the synagogue as well. It was an Orthodox synagogue, and so the men and women sat separately. The sanctuary is laid out in an L shape,
Mm-hmm.
with the reader's platform, or the bima, at the center point of the L, and the ark, the holy ark that held the Torah scrolls, at the far end. There's a video, a little tape that we'll see a little bit later on, I understand,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll try to point out those features of the sanctuary as they're shown on the film.
Mm-hmm. And at one time, the Shul, they were going to take the building to and build housing or some other type of.
We hope that all that is behind us. There was talk about sale of the Shul for whatever use. It is in the Beacon Hill Historic District, and
Mm-hmm.
so it is its exterior is protected. But we have been working very closely with an organization, a nonprofit organization called Historic Boston Incorporated. They've signed a purchase and sale agreement with the court-appointed receiver to buy the Shul. It's our plan to take over that agreement, raise the funds necessary, and restore and operate the Shul as a Jewish cultural center.
Okay. Are there any services being held there now?
No, there have not been any services since, I believe, since 1985.
Okay, and you have plans to restore it to a full synagogue?
Well, it won't have a congregation there, but our plans are that it would be available to other groups within the community.
Mm-hmm.
One possibility that we've talked about is that we'd make it available to groups to provide services for the Russian immigrant community.
Mm-hmm. Do they have a place to worship now? Or?
My understanding is that there are some small facilities, and they are otherwise invited to congregations in the area.
Mm-hmm.
Those congregations conduct services in Hebrew and in English, not much in Russian.
So this is a great opportunity to serve a segment of the Jewish people who aren't being really serviced on their own right now.
Exactly. It's an opportunity for the Vilna Shul, which was a home to one group of immigrants 70, 80 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
to become a worship site for another group of immigrants.
Mm-hmm. And as I recall, in the old West End, there were a large group of Russian Jewish immigrants that migrated to the West End from the old country.
That's before my time, but yes, that's my understanding as well.
Oh, so that's great. So we're going to bring back people who were, or maybe even relatives of children of people who might have taken part in this synagogue years ago.
We hope to do that. We hope to identify people who were members, who have memories of the congregation and its services, and to try to capture their memories and recollections.
Mm-hmm. And do you have many people from the immediate area who live on Beacon Hill who are interested in?
There are quite a few. Yes, there's some people like myself who are former worshipers at the Vilna Shul when it was an active congregation. There are other people who are interested because they see the importance of preserving this historic building, and others who see the need for a Jewish cultural center that will display the history of the Jewish community. But our attractiveness is not limited just to the Beacon Hill area. We expect that we will be a resource for the greater Boston community. We've had interest from people who are from this area and have emigrated to Florida or to the West Coast. I think we've gotten a letter from someone in China expressing support. I don't know how word got that far. And we're also, besides being of interest to the local population, we think that we are an important, will become, once we're established, an important site on the tourist
I was just going to mention that.
Boston. We're so close to the State House and so close to the African Meeting House, the Old West Church, the Harrison Gray Otis House. We belong in that list, and we want to establish the Vilna Shul as an important religious historic landmark, along with the Old West Church, the Old South Meeting House, the Old North Church.
So you envision this as being part of the Freedom Trail someday?
Exactly. Part of our plan.
And it could be a place where school children from the Boston area or outside of the Boston area could come and view the Jewish history of the Boston area.
Precisely. Yes.
Oh, great. Okay, and the Boston City Council, have they been instrumental in helping, or the city, the mayor of Boston, in helping you with this endeavor?
There was a proposal to landmark the interior of the synagogue as a Boston City landmark. That has received support from many of Boston City councilors, and Mayor Flynn endorsed it. It required, as I recall, a majority vote in the city council, or more than a majority vote, in order to sustain the landmark, and it didn't receive that. But the landmarking issue, because of our proposal to preserve the interior, the landmarking issue has largely gone away as a legal issue. Now we have the challenge of raising the funds to acquire and restore the building.
And how about the residents of the area? Do you have the backing of the residents?
We do. We had an open house inside the building in February, and we got quite a few residents came by. Many were relatively new to the area. They wanted to see the interior. They were impressed, and they were very supportive.
Oh, that's great. So you're doing a great thing for the city and for the Jewish population, and for everybody in the city to come and see what is going on with this historic building. And have you had the support of local historical societies also?
As I said, we have the nonprofit Historic Boston. The landmarking issue brought out support from quite a few organizations that are involved in historic preservation, and I'm sure that they're going to be with us as we proceed. Oh,
that's great. And we're going to be cutting away in a few seconds to a little film of the interior of the show, and I hope, David, you could give us a little background of it. So we'll cut away to the tape. Okay, here's the film now. David, can you explain what you're seeing, what the people are seeing?
That's the exterior of the synagogue on Phillip Street, the front doors. And we're now moving up to see the Mogen David, the Star of David, a stained glass window at the second floor level. The sanctuary is on the second floor, and we'll go inside the building in just a minute.
That's a beautiful building, isn't it? That's a really...
It is. It's a two-story brick. It fits in with the brick architecture of Beacon Hill.
And what is that?
That's the stained glass Star of David window that we were looking at from distance. And that's the Star of David window from the inside looking out toward Phillip Street. This is the walkway, the railing leading up to the second floor and the sanctuary. That's the stairway. There are stairways on either side of the entry vestibule. And here we are about to walk into the main sanctuary. This is the men's section, the main section of the sanctuary. And in the distance, we saw the wooden carved Aron HaKodesh, or Holy Ark. There's a shot of one of the chandeliers in the in the sanctuary.
Mm-hmm.
And there is another view of the hand-carved wooden ark. The ark was carved by a local cabinet maker, we believe, named Sam Katz, who carved several holy arks. It was apparently his specialty for various congregations. This is one of a few that survive.
Is that the open house you held?
This was at an open house we held in February.
Mm-hmm.
You can see, unfortunately, some of the water damage from some leaks in the roof. That's another view of the ark. And on the left, just coming into view on the screen, is the reader's platform, or bima. That's where the reader read from the Torah scroll.
Mm-hmm.
What's particularly special about the sanctuary is that it's illuminated, and you can see it now, by several skylights, so that even though the buildings on either side are very close to the shul, I'll come back to it. There are the tablets, the marble tablets that I mentioned with the names of the congregation members etched on it. This tablet is in the back of the men's section of the sanctuary. There's another tablet at the rear of the women's section as well.
There's a Star of David on it.
Star of David on that chair, probably a chair that the rabbi would have used.
Okay, we're back live now. Boy, that's a great building. It's really historic and.
It really is. It is architecturally very significant. It combines elements of an old early American meeting house. It's very straight, simple lines, and yet there are also the important Jewish symbols: the Holy Ark, the bima, the reader's platform. The ark itself is really spectacular. As you saw, it's about 2 stories high. It's carved out of dark wood. It has very interesting symbols in it. There are the lions of Judah on either side of the wooden carved version of the tablets with the 10 Commandments. There are the Hebrew characters with spelling out the beginnings of each of the commandments are there gilded, and there's the eternal light is symbolized on it, and immediately on the top of all of this is a large gilded eagle, an American eagle, I think, with wings spread, and it's either a symbol of God protecting this new congregation and its new building, or it's a symbol of the American eagle, in fact, of a symbol of freedom, a merger, really, of 2 cultures, of the immigrants feeling proud of their Jewishness, and also proud that they're Americans and have the opportunity to practice their religion free in this great country.
That's great. I could see. Looking at the film in the building, I could see why you want to preserve it. It's really, really.
It really is
outstanding.
Special. It's there is, as we saw, a little bit of water damage, but that's largely cosmetic. We think we've investigated the building, and it's structurally sound. It remains for us to raise the funds and restore it, but the feeling one gets inside, the combination of the architecture, the skylights, it really is a very special place, and it's important to stay there.
Like we said at the beginning of the show, it's one of the last remaining old-time synagogues. They don't build them like that today. They're modern.
That's right.
Buildings today, and you really got some history there.
Yes, we certainly do. The L-shaped configuration of the sanctuary is modeled after some very old synagogues of the 12th and 13th century in Prague and I can't recall where else, but another synagogue in Eastern Europe. And it is built in the Orthodox tradition with the separate seating sections for men and women. The skylights are a wonderful feature.
I can see that.
The walls are so close. The walls of other buildings are so close on either side, and yet it's very bright inside. And that was an architecturally significant feature, but it was also very practical. The Orthodox Jewish law prohibits worshipers from lighting candles or lighting flames or electric lights during the Sabbath. And with the skylights, it was possible to continue services well on after the sunset without the need to light candles or light gas lights or electric lights.
Well, that's really wonderful. In its heyday, did they have marriages and so forth?
We have met some people who come forth and said that they were married. They recall that they were married or they attended weddings in the shul. Weddings and there were bar mitzvahs there. It was an active synagogue. We have heard that when the scrolls containing the 5 books of Moses, when the congregation accumulated enough money to buy one or someone donated a scroll, that there were parades up and down Phillip Street.
Oh, really?
As the Torahs were moved into their place, into the Holy Ark. The synagogue was a focal point for the Jewish community in the area during its prime. But as demographics, urban renewal, and demographic patterns shifted, the population that used the synagogue dwindled, and as I said, it dwindled finally to just one member in the 1980s.
What are your plans for fundraising? How could people help you in your cause to restore this fine building?
We're beginning our fundraising campaign. We're looking for some sources of significant support. We also need contributions from everybody. And we have a slide, if we can put it up on the screen, asking people to send contributions to the Historic Boston Incorporated Vilna Shul Fund. Historic Boston is a nonprofit organization. They've been working with us very closely, and they are shepherding our fundraising until we establish ourselves as a tax-exempt.
Can you give us the telephone number again that was just shown, or do you recall the telephone?
Their address is 3 School Street in Boston, Boston 02108, and their phone number is 227-4679. And people are welcome to call and ask for more information about the shul.
And do you meet often to discuss these plans?
Our board meets regularly. We are in the process of hiring a fundraising consultant who will help us structure our fundraising campaign. And we hope to be off and running. It's a difficult time, given the current Massachusetts economy, to raise money. Unfortunately, it's the window of opportunity that we have for this project, and we're going to make a go of it. We think it's a worthwhile venture, and we think it will succeed. We know the community supports it.
I noticed there was, like you say, there was some water damage in the inside on the walls. How about the furnishings? Were they preserved pretty well, or?
Most of the furnishings have been removed, and they have been taken down, and they are in storage. They're in storage with the American Jewish Historic Society. Our plan, once we have restored the sanctuary, is to bring as much as we can back, and to work with the Jewish Historic Society and other organizations that are concerned with the history of ethnic communities, like the African Meeting House and the West End Historic Society, to develop an understanding of the history of the Jewish contribution to Boston.
When did you first join this congregation?
I started attending services there when I came to Boston in the late 1960s. And I attended services regularly until the congregation closed its doors in 1985.
And in the time when you first arrived into Boston, were there many members of the congregation at that time?
The services were quite well attended. There were, at the high holidays, there were several hundred people.
Oh, really?
It was how services ought to be. While we're not planning to establish a congregation there to go back to them, we do look forward to having special events there that will keep the sanctuary in use for worship services. Our plan is that it would be used very much like a college chapel is used for Jewish worship services.
And at that time, in the 60s, when you first came, the West End had been torn down. Do you have any knowledge of former West Enders coming to the service there? Or?
I didn't know at the time. I have spoken with. I did speak at the time with some of the people who were at services, and they were former West Enders, people who lived in the area and remember growing up in the West End, and remember, some of them, as I recall, remembered the construction of the shul.
Oh, okay, great. And are these same people interested in preserving it also? Have you heard from?
I'm not sure whether they are the same people. We have heard from people who lived in the West End, people who have attended services, who are interested in helping us with this project. And
during the high holidays of the Jewish faith, do you plan on using maybe the temple again, or the synagogue again for these?
It's too early for us to say, but if we can arrange for services, perhaps for services catering particularly to Soviet Jews here for the first time, I think that would be worthwhile.
Have you been in touch with any of the schools yet to see if they are interested in bringing children here to?
That may be a little bit early. Our plan is to work perhaps with some of the local colleges who may be willing to help us with oral history projects as we try to identify people who attended services, members of the congregation, and to get their recollections and memories of life as it relates to the shul.
Getting back to the architecture, there was like an L-shaped cove there. Is that prominent in all type of temples?
It's fairly unusual, but it is a style of synagogue design. The shorter leg of the L was used was the women's section. There is a separate entrance to that portion of the sanctuary with a sign on it that says women's entrance.
Okay, and there was a separate men's entrance.
And separate men's entrance. The women's section is banked somewhat so that the women would have a better view of what was going on the reader's platform and in front of the Holy Ark.
Okay, in today's times, in the modern synagogue today, is there the same similar women and men's section, or is that a tradition?
The Orthodox congregations still preserve separate seating for men and women. They may do it in different ways, sometimes by a separate balcony, a women's balcony. Conservative and Reform congregations don't separate men and women in the seating.
Okay. Gee, this was very informative, David. I enjoyed listening to you and giving us the history of the Vilna Shul, and we hope you're successful in your fundraising efforts and your restoration efforts, and thank you very much for being here, and see you at the next West End video newsletter. Covered now.